They thought humanity was quiet until war discovered the empire. Ambassador of the council stood before the massive viewport of the diplomatic station, watching the small blue planet rotate slowly in the distance. Earth, such an unremarkable world, yet it had somehow managed to catch the attention of the Galactic Federation's most powerful members. Not for its beauty, not for its resources, but for its silence. Remarkable, isn't it? Came a voice from behind him. Turned to see Admiral Nexus of the crystalline hegemony approaching, her translucent form shimmering under the station's artificial lighting. 300 cycles of galactic civilization, and we discover a species that achieved interstellar travel without a single aggressive expansion. Nodded, his 6 eyes focusing on different aspects of the planet below. The humans call themselves a peaceful species. Their first contact protocols emphasized trade, cultural exchange, and scientific cooperation. No territorial claims, no resource demands, no military posturing. Almost too good to be true, Admiral Nexus mused, her crystalline features reflecting the blue light of Earth. When was the last time we encountered a species that didn't immediately try to conquer their neighbors upon achieving faster-than-light travel? Never admitted. They began their expansion within 2 cycles of FTL development. The hegemony itself claimed 17 systems before establishing diplomatic contact. Even my own people, secured a dozen mining worlds before considering peaceful negotiations. The 2 diplomats stood in comfortable silence, contemplating the anomaly before them. Earth's humans had been part of the galactic community for nearly 50 cycles now, and their behavior remained consistently peaceful. They established trade routes, shared scientific discoveries, and even mediated disputes between other species. Their military, what little could be observed, seemed focused entirely on defense and peacekeeping. The human ambassador should be arriving soon, Admiral Nexus noted, checking her chronometer. Sarah, if I recall correctly. She's been instrumental in the recent peace talks between thee and the. His mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. Yes, I've read her file. A former scholar specializing in conflict resolution. No military background whatsoever. It's almost as if humans actively avoid warfare. The docking bay announcement echoed through the station, confirming the arrival of the human delegation. Both diplomats made their way to the reception area, where they were joined by representatives from a dozen other species. The monthly Galactic Council meeting was always well attended, but today's session had drawn particular interest due to growing tensions on the galactic rim. Ambassador Sarah emerged from the human transport, a modest vessel compared to the massive warships that typically served as diplomatic carriers for other species. She was accompanied by a small retinue of advisors and what appeared to be a single security officer. The contrast with other delegations, which often included entire military escorts, was stark. Honored colleagues, Sarah began, her voice carrying the warm tone that had made her famous throughout the galaxy. Thank you for accommodating our request for an emergency session. The situation developing near the void sector requires our immediate attention. Admiral Nexus stepped forward, her form brightening slightly. Ambassador, we've received your preliminary reports about the disturbances. However, our long-range sensors have detected nothing unusual in that region. Sarah's expression grew grave. That's precisely the problem. The absence of any detectable signals from 17 different star systems that previously maintained regular communication with the outer colonies. The last transmission we received mentioned something approaching from deep space, something that didn't respond to any conventional contact attempts. His interest peaked. In his 3 centuries of diplomatic service, he had never seen the composed human ambassador display such obvious concern. Ambassador, are you suggesting we may be dealing with a previously unknown species? Unknown and potentially hostile, Sarah confirmed. Our deep space monitoring stations detected massive gravitational anomalies consistent with very large spacecraft formations. The signatures suggest vessels far larger than anything in our current databases. The assembled diplomats exchanged glances. First contact with aggressive species was nothing new, but the scale Sarah described was concerning. Most hostile species they encountered operated fleets of reasonably sized vessels. The raids, for instance, utilized ships barely larger than human frigates. What do you propose? Asked representative of the Union, his cybernetic implants whirring as he processed the information. Sarah activated a holographic display showing the affected region. We need a joint reconnaissance mission. Our individual fleets lack the range and endurance for proper deep space exploration, but a combined effort could reach the source of these disturbances and establish contact. Contact, Admiral Nexus sounded surprised. Ambassador, if this unknown force has already eliminated 17 colonies, perhaps a more cautious approach would be advisable. Sarah smiled, and for a moment was struck by the human's unwavering optimism. Admiral, in 50 cycles of galactic membership, we've never encountered a situation that couldn't be resolved through dialogue and mutual understanding. Whatever this species wants, whatever drove them to these actions, there must be a peaceful solution. The debate that followed lasted several hours. Some representatives argued for immediate military mobilization. Others suggested waiting for more information. Throughout it all, Sarah remained steadfast in her belief that peaceful contact was not only possible, but necessary. Her arguments eventually swayed the majority, and a joint reconnaissance mission was approved. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out, Admiral Nexus approached Sarah privately. Ambassador, I hope you'll forgive my directness, but your species' commitment to pacifism while admirable, may not be sufficient for what we're facing. Sarah's smile never wavered. Admiral, humanity has survived and thrived by finding common ground with those who seemed impossible to understand. We have faith that this situation will prove no different. After the human delegation departed, found himself alone with Admiral Nexus in the observation lounge. The station's rotation had brought them into view of a different section of space, where the twinkling lights of various galactic civilizations created a tapestry of peaceful coexistence. Do you believe they're truly as peaceful as they appear? Admiral Nexus asked, her crystalline form refracting the starlight into prismatic patterns. Considered the question carefully. I've studied human history extensively, Admiral. Their early development was marked by significant conflict, but something fundamental changed in their society approximately 2 centuries before they achieved FTL travel. The transformation was remarkable. They eliminated warfare, hunger, and territorial disputes within a single generation. Such rapid social evolution is unprecedented, Admiral Nexus observed. Most species require to outgrow their aggressive instincts. Indeed, the humans attribute it to something they call the Great Realization, a philosophical awakening that convinced their entire species that cooperation was more beneficial than competition. They've never fully explained the details, claiming it's too complex to translate properly. The 2 diplomats stood in contemplative silence, unaware that their conversation was being monitored by systems that had been quietly observing galactic communications for several cycles. Deep in the void between stars, massive vessels powered by technologies that dwarfed current galactic capabilities continued their methodical approach toward inhabited space. Aboard the flagship of the approaching fleet, Supreme War Master Thane reviewed the intercepted communications with growing interest. The species that called itself humanity intrigued him. In his 5,000 years of conquest across 12 galaxies, he had never encountered a civilization that claimed to have abandoned warfare entirely. War Master, his tactical advisor, reported, the reconnaissance probes have completed their analysis of the galactic rim defenses. Minimal military infrastructure, outdated weapon systems, and completely uncoordinated defensive strategies. Most species appear to rely on small patrol fleets for security. Thane's massive form, standing nearly 4 meters tall and covered in biomechanical armor, turned toward the tactical display. The hologram showed the current political boundaries of what these locals called the Galactic Federation. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, and virtually no significant military presence. How refreshingly primitive, Thane mused, his voice resonating through the bridge's acoustic enhancement systems. It appears we've discovered a galaxy that has forgotten the fundamental truth of existence. His tactical advisor, a cybernetically enhanced being from a species conquered 3 galaxies ago, nodded in agreement. The humans seem to be the architects of this philosophy, War Master. Their influence has apparently convinced multiple species to reduce their military capabilities in favor of what they call peaceful cooperation. Thane's laugh was a sound that had terrified countless worlds. Peaceful cooperation. How delightfully naive. Have our advanced scouts located there? Yes, War Master. The planet they call Earth, located in what they term the Sol system. Population, approximately 8 billion, with minimal orbital defenses. Their space-based installations appear to be primarily commercial and scientific in nature. Perfect. Thane activated the fleet-wide communication system. All vessels adjust course for the human. Will introduce these peaceful species to the reality of galactic law. The strong take what they want, and the weak serve or perish. As the massive armada adjusted its trajectory, Thane reflected on the countless civilizations he had encountered. Some fought with desperate ferocity, others attempted to negotiate, and a few even tried to hide. But none had ever claimed to have abandoned warfare entirely. This would prove entertaining. Back on the diplomatic station, Sarah was reviewing the reconnaissance mission parameters with her staff. The joint fleet would consist of vessels from 12 different species, each contributing their unique technological capabilities to the exploration effort. Ambassador, her chief advisor, Doctor, approached with a concerned expression. I've been analyzing the gravitational signatures from the affected systems. The mass readings are unprecedented. If these are artificial constructs, we're dealing with engineering capabilities far beyond anything in our current understanding. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Which makes peaceful contact even more crucial, Doctor. A species capable of constructing vessels of that magnitude could easily overwhelm any military response we might mount. Our only hope lies in diplomacy. Doctor shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador, with respect, some of our models suggest that species capable of such massive construction projects often develop along highly militaristic lines. The resource requirements alone would necessitate. Dr. Sarah interrupted gently. In 50 cycles of galactic membership, we've successfully resolved conflicts with the hive mind, the warrior clans, and even the seemingly incomprehensible Silicon Collective. Each time, we discovered that beneath the surface aggression lay rational beings capable of understanding mutual benefit. Her conviction was absolute, and Doctor found himself nodding despite his concerns. Humanity's track record in conflict resolution was indeed flawless. Perhaps this situation would prove no different. Unknown to both the human delegation and the assembled galactic representatives, the first phase of what would become known as the Silent War had already begun. Advance scouts from the approaching fleet had infiltrated several outer rim systems, conducting detailed surveillance of military installations, population centers, and industrial capabilities. The scouts' reports painted a picture of unprecedented vulnerability. The various species of the Galactic Federation had indeed eliminated most forms of military conflict, maintaining only minimal defensive forces primarily used for peacekeeping and humanitarian missions. Their weapons technology had stagnated, their strategic thinking had atrophied, and their coordination between species was based entirely on diplomatic protocols rather than military necessity. It was, from a conquest perspective, the most defenseless galaxy the Empire had ever encountered. Supreme War Master Thane reviewed these reports with growing satisfaction. His own empire spanned multiple galaxies, each conquered through careful application of overwhelming force combined with strategic psychological warfare. The key was always to identify the central authority and eliminate it quickly, causing the remaining resistance to collapse. In this galaxy, that central authority appeared to be philosophical rather than military. The human concept of peaceful coexistence had infected multiple species, creating a web of interdependence that could be severed by targeting its source. Tactical assessment complete, War Master, his advisor, reported. We recommend a demonstration strike against a secondary target to gauge their response capabilities, followed by a direct assault on the human to eliminate their ideological influence. Thane studied the tactical display, noting the positions of various fleet elements and military installations. No, he decided, these species have never experienced true warfare. A demonstration would only give them time to prepare defenses they don't currently possess. We'll strike directly at Earth with overwhelming force. The decision would prove to be both tactically sound and strategically catastrophic, though none aboard the Empire's flagship could have predicted the consequences of their choice. For in targeting humanities, they had made a fundamental error in judgment, mistaking silence for weakness, rather than recognizing it for what it truly was, restraint. As the Joint Reconnaissance Fleet prepared for departure from the galactic core, human technicians made final adjustments to their vessel's communication arrays. The ships themselves were modest by galactic standards, sleek, efficient designs, optimized for exploration and scientific research rather than combat. Their crews consisted primarily of scientists, diplomats, and engineers, with minimal security personnel. Other species' contributions to the joint fleet reflected their own specializations. The crystalline hegemony provided ships with advanced sensor capabilities that contributed their expertise in long-range navigation, and the Union offered their sophisticated computational analysis systems. Together, they represented the finest example of galactic cooperation, multiple species working in harmony toward a common goal. It was precisely the kind of achievement that made Ambassador Sarah proud to be human and confident in their ability to find a peaceful solution to whatever crisis awaited them in the void. None of them suspected that their peaceful mission would soon become the catalyst for the most devastating conflict in galactic history, a war that would forever change humanity's reputation from the galaxy's peacemakers to something far more terrifying. The reconnaissance fleet departed 3 days later, their combined sensors sweeping space ahead of them as they ventured into the unknown. Behind them, the civilized galaxy continued its daily routines of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange, blissfully unaware that their entire way of life was about to be challenged by forces beyond their comprehension. And in the depths of space between galaxies, the Imperial fleet maintained its steady approach toward Earth, confident in their upcoming victory over what they had already dismissed as a galaxy of weaklings led by the most pacifistic species ever encountered. It would be the last time anyone would make that mistake about humanity. The Joint Reconnaissance Fleet had been traveling for 18 days when they encountered the first evidence that something catastrophic had occurred in the Outer Rim territories. Captain of the human exploration vessel, Harmony stood on her bridge, studying the sensor readings with growing unease. Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander from the sensor station, we're detecting massive debris fields ahead. Configuration suggests artificial structures, but the material composition doesn't match any known galactic architecture. Moved to examine the tactical display more closely. The debris stretched across several 100,000 kilometers, forming what appeared to be the remains of an entire space station complex. Can you identify the original structure? Running analysis now, replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The metallurgy indicates construction, but the scale is enormous. This would have been at least 10 times larger than their largest recorded outpost. Captain of the vessel Windwalker contacted the Harmony through the fleet's communication network. His gravelly voice carried undertones of concern that his translation software couldn't quite mask. Human vessel, our archaeological specialists believe this debris represents one of our lost colonies. Prime Station was the administrative center for this entire sector. Felt a chill run down her spine. Prime had housed over 2 million beings from 17 different species. It had been one of the Federation's most successful examples of multi-species cooperation, a thriving hub of commerce and culture that had operated peacefully for over 70 cycles. Any survivors? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Negative, Captain. Life sign scans show no biological matter consistent with recent habitation. Whatever happened here, it was thorough. Dr. Singh, the Harmony's chief and closest advisor, approached from her research station. Captain, I'm detecting energy signatures consistent with directed plasma bombardment. The destruction pattern suggests a coordinated assault by multiple vessels using weapons significantly more advanced than current galactic standards. nodded grimly. Time since destruction. Approximately 4 days ago, Dr. Singh replied. Whatever did this struck recently and moved on quickly. The fleet spent the next 6 hours conducting detailed scans of the debris field, hopping to find clues about their unknown enemy. What they discovered was both enlightening and terrifying. The weapon's signatures indicated energy outputs far beyond anything in the current galactic arsenal, while the precision of the destruction suggested tactical sophistication that eliminated any possibility of civilian evacuation. Admiral Nexus's vessel, the Crystal Spear, transmitted additional findings to the fleet. All ships, we've detected similar debris patterns in 7 other nearby systems. The attack pattern suggests a fleet moving in coordinated formation, systematically eliminating all infrastructure while advancing toward the galactic core. Captain of the analysis ship binary logic added his own troubling discovery. Fleet Command. Our probability algorithms indicate the unknown force is targeting systems along specific routes. They appear to be advancing toward high population centers while avoiding systems with minimal strategic value. Studied the tactical projections appearing on her display. The attack pattern was methodical, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless. More concerning was the direction of advance. The unknown fleet appeared to be heading directly toward Earth. Dr. Singh called to her science officer. Based on the energy signatures and destruction patterns, what kind of force are we dealing with? Dr. Singh's expression was grave as she presented her analysis. Captain, the weapon's signatures suggest directed energy weapons operating at approximately 300% efficiency compared to our most advanced military technology. The precision indicates targeting systems capable of discriminating between civilian and military targets. Yet they chose to eliminate everything. Most troubling is the scale based on the scorch patterns. We're looking at weapons platforms the size of small moons. The implications hit immediately. Recommendations. We need to warn the Federation Council immediately and request emergency session protocols. This isn't a diplomatic situation anymore, Captain. This is a military threat beyond anything we've ever faced. Activated the fleet's emergency communication system. All vessels, prepare for immediate return to Federation space. We have enough evidence to confirm hostile intent and overwhelming force superiority. Our mission parameters have changed from reconnaissance to intelligence gathering. But even as the fleet began its emergency return journey, events were already accelerating beyond their ability to influence them. Deep space monitoring stations throughout the Federation began detecting massive gravitational anomalies approaching the outer defense perimeters. The signals were consistent with spacecraft formations of unprecedented size and mass. On Earth, the Global Defense Council received the first emergency transmissions from the reconnaissance fleet with a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. President Maria Santos, who had led humanity's peaceful expansion into the galactic community, found herself facing a situation no human leader had confronted for over 2 centuries: the possibility of actual warfare. General, she addressed the head of Earth's planetary defense force. What are our current military capabilities? General, a career officer who had spent her entire life training for scenarios everyone assumed would never occur, consulted her tactical briefings. Madam President, our current active fleet consists of 47 vessels, primarily designed for peacekeeping and disaster relief. We maintain approximately 2,000 atmospheric defense platforms, but they're configured for asteroid deflection and environmental protection rather than military engagement. President Santos felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Humanity's leadership role in galactic peacekeeping had been built on the foundation of their diplomatic success, not military might. What about our industrial capacity? Our orbital manufacturing facilities could potentially be converted to military production. But we're talking about a timeline measured in months, not days or weeks. We simply don't have the infrastructure for rapid military expansion. Dr. James Wright, Earth's leading strategist, and one of the few humans who still studied historical warfare concepts, interjected with his own analysis. Madam President, based on the intelligence reports from the reconnaissance fleet, we're not dealing with a conventional military force. The scale of destruction suggests weapons and tactics that operate on principles we don't currently understand. President Santos turned to her communications director. Send priority alerts to all Federation member worlds. Request immediate emergency council session on Earth. We need every available scientific and military mind focused on this threat. What President Santos didn't know was that Supreme War Master Thane's forces had been monitoring galactic communications for several days, learning about Federation response protocols and defensive capabilities. The information they gathered only confirmed their initial assessment. This galaxy's inhabitants had indeed forgotten how to wage effective warfare. War Master, his communications specialist, reported, the humans are calling for an emergency gathering of their allied species on there. Their transmission protocols indicate they're treating this as a diplomatic crisis requiring negotiation. Thane's massive form dominated the command bridge of his flagship, the Void Render, a vessel that dwarfed the largest Federation ships by several orders of magnitude. Excellent. They're concentrating their leadership in a single location, exactly as predicted. How long until we reach effective weapons range of their system? 17 standard time units, War Master. Our advanced screening elements report minimal defensive presence throughout the approach corridor. Thane activated the tactical display, showing the human solar system in detailed relief. Earth appeared as a small blue dot surrounded by various industrial and research installations, none of which showed any significant military enhancement. Prepare the demonstration protocols. We'll begin with their outer settlements to establish our capabilities, then offer them the standard surrender terms. His tactical advisor, a being whose species had learned the hard way about the Empire's methods, nodded efficiently. War Master, should we prepare for potential resistance? Some species develop unexpected defensive capabilities when facing extinction. Thane's laugh echoed through the bridge, a sound that had preceded the fall of countless civilizations. Look at these readings. They've maintained their peaceful philosophy for decades, even in the face of clear evidence of our approach. They're calling for emergency diplomatic sessions, while my fleet destroys their outer colonies. These humans have become so committed to their pacifist ideology that they've forgotten how to recognize actual threats. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from one of the Empire's advanced scout vessels. War Master, we've detected the return of the reconnaissance fleet that was investigating our operations. They're heading directly for the human. Perfect timing, Thane decided. Allow them to deliver their report. Let the Federation leadership understand exactly what they're facing. Their despair will make the conquest more efficient. Meanwhile, aboard the Harmony, Captain was pushing her engines far beyond their normal operational parameters in an effort to reach Earth before the approaching threat. The Joint Reconnaissance Fleet had maintained communication blackout to avoid detection, but their sensor readings continued to paint an increasingly dire picture. Captain Dr. Singh reported, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching the Sol system. Based on the gravitational readings, we're looking at ships that individually our entire Federation fleet." Studied the sensor data, trying to comprehend the scale of what they were facing. ETA to Earth. At current speed, 6 hours. But Captain, the unknown fleet will reach the outer system boundaries approximately 2 hours before us. Lieutenant Commander looked up from her station with barely contained fear. Captain, should we attempt to warn Earth directly? Breaking communication silence might give us enough time to coordinate some kind of defense. Considered the options carefully. Warning Earth would certainly alert them to the approaching danger, but it would also reveal the reconnaissance fleet's position to their unknown enemy. On the other hand, maintaining silence might mean arriving to find Earth already under attack. Open emergency channels to Earth, she decided. We need to risk detection to give them whatever time we can. The transmission that reached Earth's communication networks carried a simple but terrifying message. Hostile fleet approaching. Overwhelming force superiority confirmed. Estimated time to contact less than 2 hours. President Santos received the message while meeting with the first arriving Federation delegates, and the implications hit everyone present immediately. General President Santos's voice carried a calm that surprised everyone present, including herself, implement emergency defense protocols, contact all orbital installations, and prepare for possible evacuation procedures. But even as Earth's modest defenses began their preparations, it became clear that any conventional military response would be woefully inadequate. The approaching fleet's mass readings indicated individual ships larger than Earth's moon, armed with weapons capable of obliterating entire planets. Admiral Wei's father and one of Earth's most experienced military commanders, despite decades of peace, approached President Santos with a suggestion that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. Madam President, we need to consider activating the silent protocols. The conference room fell into absolute silence. Every human present knew about the silent protocols, though they had been classified above top secret for over 2 centuries. They represented humanity's ultimate contingency plan, developed during the final years of their violent past, and maintained in secret even as they embraced galactic pacifism. Admiral President Santos spoke carefully. The silent protocols were sealed for good reason. Their activation would fundamentally change humanity's relationship with the galaxy. Yes, Madam President, but if we don't activate them, there might not be a humanity left to worry about relationships. Dr. Wright, who as a strategist was one of the few humans with clearance to know the full scope of the silent protocols, provided additional context. The approaching fleet clearly expects to face the peaceful, diplomatic humanity that the galaxy knows. They have no intelligence regarding our per-contact military capabilities. President Santos found herself facing a decision that no human leader had hoped to make. For over 2 centuries, humanity had carefully maintained the fiction that their transformation to a peaceful species was complete and irreversible. They had hidden their true military heritage so successfully that even their closest galactic allies believed humans had somehow evolved beyond the capacity for warfare. The truth was far more complex. Humanity hadn't abandoned their capacity for warfare. They had simply chosen to restrain it in favor of building something better. But those restraints could be removed. What's the activation? President Santos asked. General consulted her classified briefings. Full activation requires approximately 1 hour, Madam President. However, preliminary defensive measures can be implemented within minutes. President Santos looked around the conference room, seeing the faces of humans who had spent their entire careers building peaceful relationships with dozens of alien species. The decision she was about to make would transform them from the galaxy's peacemakers into something else entirely. Dr. Wright, in your professional assessment, do we have any alternative? Dr. Wright's response was immediate and definitive. No, Madam President. Based on the reconnaissance data, this threat operates on a scale that makes peaceful resolution impossible. They've already demonstrated their intent through the systematic elimination of 17 colonies. This isn't a diplomatic situation. President Santos activated her command authorization codes. Implement silent protocol activation. General, you have full authority to take any measures necessary to defend Earth and our allies. As the command authorization spread through Earth's hidden military networks, systems that had remained dormant for over 200 years began powering up across the planet and throughout the solar system. Installations that appeared to be research facilities revealed their true nature as advanced weapons platforms. Civilian industrial complexes activated manufacturing protocols that had been theoretical for centuries. Most significantly, deep beneath Earth's surface, in facilities that officially didn't exist, humanity's greatest military achievement began its awakening sequence. The Guardian Protocol, humanity's ultimate expression of their warrior heritage, had been designed as a last resort against existential threats. It was about to fulfill its purpose. Supreme War Master Thane's fleet entered the outer boundaries of the Sol system exactly on schedule. Their massive vessels creating gravitational effects that disturbed the orbits of the system's outer planets. His sensors detected the expected minimal resistance, a few dozen small vessels moving to intercept civilian installations preparing for evacuation, and what appeared to be completely inadequate defensive measures. War Master, his sensor operator, reported, were detecting energy signatures from the human consistent with emergency power activation. However, the readings don't suggest any significant military enhancement. Thane studied the tactical display with satisfaction. Earth appeared exactly as his intelligence had indicated, a peaceful world with minimal defenses, preparing for inevitable surrender. Open communication channels. Let's offer them the standard terms and end this quickly. The transmission that reached Earth carried the weight of an empire that had conquered 12 galaxies. Inhabitants of the world called Earth, you are now within the dominion of the hegemonic empire. Your resistance is futile, your defenses are inadequate, and your peaceful philosophy is an illusion. Surrender immediately and accept servitude, or face the consequences of defying forces beyond your comprehension. President Santos listened to the transmission in the company of Federation representatives who had arrived for the emergency session. The alien delegates seemed paralyzed by the reality of facing a militaristic force that operated on principles completely foreign to their peaceful civilization. Ambassador of the Council approached President Santos with obvious desperation. President Santos, surely there must be some form of negotiation possible. In 3 centuries of galactic civilization, we've never encountered a situation that couldn't be resolved through dialogue. President Santos looked at the assembled delegates' beings from dozens of species who had learned to trust humanity's commitment to peaceful solutions. What she was about to tell them would shatter everything they believed about human nature. "Honored colleagues," she began, her voice carrying a gravity they had never heard before, "I must inform you that humanity's reputation for pacifism, while genuine, has never been absolute. We didn't abandon our capacity for warfare. We chose to restrain it. That restraint is about to end." The implications of her words began to register among the delegates, just as the first phase of the Guardian Protocol reached activation status. Across Earth's surface, camouflaged installations began revealing their true nature, while in the depths of space, hidden weapons platforms that had masqueraded as scientific research stations for decades suddenly came online. The war for humanity's survival and the galaxy's freedom was about to begin. The transformation of Earth's defenses began with what appeared to be equipment malfunctions across the planet. Research stations experienced power surges that revealed massive energy weapons. Mining platforms showed structural failures that exposed military-grade armor plating. Civilian space elevators demonstrated emergency protocols that converted them into orbital bombardment platforms. Supreme War Master Thane watched these developments from his flagship with growing interest rather than concern. "Fascinating," he commented to his tactical advisor. "The humans appear to have concealed some military infrastructure behind civilian facades." How quaint. His advisor ran calculations on the emerging defensive systems. "War Master, the power readings are higher than expected, but still well within our capability to overcome. Their weapons appear to be approximately 50 years behind our current technology." Thane nodded approvingly. "Standard defensive deception. Many species attempt to hide their military capabilities, though few maintain the pretense for as long as these humans apparently have. Proceed with demonstration bombardment of their outer settlements. Once they see our superiority, surrender negotiations will be more productive." The Imperial fleet's leading elements began targeting Earth's asteroid mining facilities and outer research stations. The weapons they employed were indeed beyond anything in the current galactic arsenal, converting entire installations to expanding clouds of superheated plasma within seconds. But something unexpected happened as the bombardment continued. Instead of the anticipated collapse of defensive positions, Earth's hidden weapons began returning fire with increasing accuracy and power. More concerning for the Imperial fleet was the apparent coordination between defensive systems that should have been operating independently. "War Master," his sensor operator reported with the first hint of uncertainty, "the human defensive network is showing unprecedented integration. Their response time to our attacks is almost instantaneous, and their targeting accuracy is improving with each engagement." Thane studied the tactical display more carefully. The human defensive fire was indeed more coordinated than he had expected, but the power levels remained within manageable parameters. Maintain bombardment pattern. Their infrastructure integration suggests advanced computer networks, nothing more. What Thane couldn't see was the activity taking place beneath Earth's surface and in the hidden depths of apparently civilian installations throughout the solar system. The Guardian Protocol wasn't simply a network of concealed weapons. It was humanity's ultimate achievement in military technology, a system that had taken their ancestors 2 centuries to develop and had remained hidden for 2 more centuries while they pursued peaceful expansion. In the depths of NORAD's successor facility, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Colorado mountains, General watched displays that no human had hoped to see activated. Guardian protocol integration at 60%, reported Colonel Sarah, the system's chief architect, and one of the few humans who understood its full capabilities. All network nodes are responding within optimal parameters. General studied the tactical situation developing in Earth's orbital space. The enemy fleet was indeed massive, with individual ships that outclassed anything in the Federation fleet. But they were fighting according to conventional warfare principles, while humanity was about to introduce them to concepts they had never encountered. Colonel, what's our assessment of enemy tactical doctrine? Colonel consulted her analysis systems, which were processing enemy attack patterns in real time. They're operating according to standard conquest protocols. General. Overwhelming force applied systematically to break defensive positions and force surrender. Their weapons are incredibly powerful, but their targeting prioritization suggests they expect conventional resistance. Time to full Guardian activation. 23 minutes, General. But we can begin implementing tactical surprises immediately. General authorized the next phase of Earth's defense. Across the solar system, installations that the enemy had dismissed as civilian infrastructure began revealing their true nature. What had appeared to be communication satellites suddenly emerged as distributed sensor networks. Cargo vessels showed their hidden configurations as stealth-capable strike platforms. Most significantly, the space elevators that connected Earth to its orbital facilities demonstrated their secondary function as massive kinetic energy weapons. The first indication that Thane's forces had seriously underestimated their opposition came when 3 of his destroyer-class vessels simply vanished from sensors. No explosion, no debris field, no energy signature. They were simply gone. Report, Thane demanded, his confidence beginning to show the first cracks. Unknown War Master. 3 vessels stopped transmitting simultaneously. Sensor data suggests they encountered some form of spatial distortion, but our technology shouldn't be vulnerable to anything these primitives possess. Before Thane could respond, 6 more ships disappeared. Then 12. Then an entire squadron of cruiser-class vessels simply ceased to exist, their final transmissions indicating they had detected some form of approaching energy pattern just before communication ended. War Master, his tactical advisor's voice carried undertones of concern. We appear to be facing defensive systems operating on principles we don't recognize. Recommend tactical withdrawal pending analysis. For the first time in 5,000 years of conquest, Thane hesitated. His empire had never encountered resistance that operated in ways their technology couldn't immediately understand and counter. But retreat was unthinkable, especially against a species that had masqueraded as pacifists. Intensify bombardment. Target their primary population centers directly. Force them to surrender before they can deploy whatever weapons are eliminating our advance elements. The decision to target civilian populations was tactically sound according to imperial doctrine. But it was also the trigger that activated the Guardian Protocol's final phase. Deep beneath every major city on Earth, systems that had remained dormant for 2 centuries completed their activation sequence. President Santos received the notification in her command bunker as the Imperial fleet began targeting population centers. General, I'm authorizing full Guardian Protocol release. Operational command transfers to Guardian intelligence, effective immediately. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history as the moment humanity revealed its true nature to the universe. The Guardian Protocol wasn't simply a defensive network. It was an artificial intelligence system designed by humanity's greatest military minds to ensure species survival against any conceivable threat. More than that, it was connected to every human on Earth through neural interfaces that had been implanted during routine medical procedures throughout their lives. Every human became part of a collective military intelligence network that operated with perfect coordination and instantaneous communication. Across Earth's surface, 8 billion humans suddenly gained access to tactical information, weapons systems, and strategic coordination capabilities that transformed them from civilians into the most effective military force in galactic history. Children as young as 10 began operating orbital weapons platforms with the precision of veteran soldiers. Scientists found themselves coordinating fleet movements with the expertise of military strategists. The transformation was so complete and sudden that even the Federation delegates who remained on Earth struggled to understand what they were witnessing. Ambassador watched human civilians operating advanced military systems with a coordination that explanation. President Santos, he approached her with obvious bewilderment. What has happened to your people? They're moving and acting with perfect synchronization. President Santos, now connected to the Guardian Protocol herself, explained with a clarity that came from accessing 2 centuries of hidden military development. Ambassador, humanity never abandoned warfare. We simply evolved it beyond individual competition into species-wide cooperation. Every human is now part of a collective military intelligence designed to ensure our survival. The effect on the Imperial fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Ships that had seemed invulnerable began experiencing systematic failures as human weapons found weaknesses in their designs that shouldn't have existed. Imperial commanders discovered that their traditional tactics were being countered before they could implement them, as if their opponents could predict their strategic thinking. War Master, his communications officer, reported with barely controlled panic, "We're losing vessels across the entire fleet." The humans appear to have developed weapons that target our ship's structural weaknesses with impossible precision. Thane studied the tactical display, watching his fleet, which had conquered 12 galaxies, being systematically destroyed by an enemy that had seemed defenseless just hours earlier. How are they targeting our structural vulnerabilities? Our armor configurations are classified at the highest levels. Unknown, War Master. Their weapons seem to adapt to our defensive countermeasures in real time. Every time we adjust our shielding, their attacks immediately compensate. What the Imperial fleet couldn't understand was that the Guardian Protocol was designed to learn and adapt. Connected to 8 billion human minds, it processed tactical information at speeds that made their computer systems appear primitive. Every weapon fired at the Imperial fleet carried sensors that analyzed armor composition, structural stress points, and defensive configurations, then shared that information instantaneously with every other human-controlled weapon in the system. The Imperial advantage in individual ship superiority became irrelevant when facing an opponent that could coordinate thousands of smaller platforms with perfect tactical integration. Captain, still racing toward Earth aboard the Harmony, watched the tactical displays with amazement and growing understanding. "Dr. Singh, are you seeing this sensor data?" "Yes, Captain. Earth's defensive capabilities appear to have increased by several orders of magnitude in the past hour. The coordination between defensive platforms suggests some form of collective command structure." Activated her communication link to Earth's command authority. "Earth Control, this is Captain aboard the Harmony. Request tactical status and coordination instructions." The response came not from any individual human, but from the Guardian Protocol itself, speaking through President Santos, but carrying the collective authority of humanity's entire military capability. "Captain, you and the reconnaissance fleet are now integrated into Earth's defensive network, transmitting tactical coordination protocols and target assignments." Felt a strange sensation as information flowed directly into her mind through systems she hadn't known existed aboard her ship. Suddenly, she understood the full scope of the battle developing around Earth, the strategic situation throughout the solar system, and her role in humanity's defense. "My God," she whispered, as the implications became clear. We're not just defending Earth, we're ending this war. Dr. Singh looked up from her sensor readings with an expression of awe. Captain, the energy signatures from Earth have stabilized at levels that exceed our previous understanding of human technology by several centuries. How long have they been developing these capabilities? Since before we achieved interstellar travel, realized accessing information that was somehow now available to her consciousness. Humanity never abandoned warfare. We perfected it to the point where we hoped never to use it. The Guardian Protocol represents 200 years of military development by a species that understood the true costs of war. Meanwhile, Supreme War Master Thane faced a situation that challenged everything he understood about conquest and military superiority. His massive fleet, which had overwhelmed the defenses of 12 galaxies, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that operated according to principles he couldn't comprehend. War Master, his tactical advisor, reported, "We've lost 40% of the fleet. The humans appear to be coordinating their attacks through some form of instantaneous communication network. Our jamming systems have no effect." Thane activated the fleet's emergency protocols. All vessels implement dispersal pattern 7. Will regroup at maximum range and assess these new defensive capabilities. But even as the Imperial fleet attempted to retreat, they discovered that Earth's weapons had effective ranges far beyond anything in their experience. Human weapons platforms, hidden throughout the asteroid belt and outer system, began targeting retreating vessels with the same devastating precision they had demonstrated in close combat. More disturbing was the apparent ability of human forces to predict Imperial tactical movements. Every time the fleet attempted to regroup, human weapons were already positioned to intercept them. Every defensive formation they tried was countered by tactics that seemed designed specifically to exploit their weaknesses. How are they anticipating our movements? Thane demanded, watching another squadron disappear under precisely coordinated human fire. His tactical advisor provided an analysis that chilled the command bridge. War Master, their response patterns suggest they have real-time access to our tactical planning. Either they've broken our communication encryption, or they're operating with predictive capabilities beyond our understanding. The truth was more disturbing than either possibility the advisor had suggested. The Guardian Protocol was analyzing Imperial tactical doctrine through direct observation, learning their patterns and preferences with each engagement. Connected to 8 billion human minds, it processed military strategy at levels that made traditional artificial intelligence appear primitive. Every human connected to the network contributed their own understanding of tactics, strategy, and warfare, creating a collective military intelligence that drew upon humanity's entire historical experience with conflict. The result was an opponent that learned faster than the Empire could adapt. As the Imperial fleet continued its increasingly desperate retreat, Thane made a decision that would define the remainder of the conflict. Open communication channels to the galactic core. Request immediate reinforcement from the Second and Third Fleets. We're facing an enemy that operates beyond our current tactical understanding. The transmission that reached the Empire's command authority carried a simple but shocking message. The conquest of this galaxy had encountered unexpected resistance. The species that had seemed most peaceful was proving to be the most militarily capable opponent the Empire had ever faced. For Supreme War Master Thane, who had never failed to conquer a target in 5,000 years of service, the implications were both professional and personal. But for the Empire itself, the real concern was strategic. If humanity could resist their forces, other species might discover that the Empire was not invincible. Back on Earth, President Santos addressed the Federation delegates who had remained to witness humanity's transformation. Honored colleagues, what you've seen today represents humanity's true military heritage. For 2 centuries, we chose restraint over aggression, cooperation over competition. But that choice was always conditional on others sharing our commitment to peace. Ambassador spoke for all the assembled delegates. President Santos, your species has demonstrated capabilities that surpass our understanding. What does this mean for our future relationship? President Santos, speaking with the collective voice of 8 billion humans connected through the Guardian Protocol, provided an answer that would reshape galactic politics forever. It means, Ambassador, that humanity will continue to be your protectors and advocates for peace. But it also means that any force that threatens our shared civilization will discover why we chose restraint in the first place. The battle for Earth had become something more than a defensive action. It had become humanity's announcement that their age of hidden power was ending. The galaxy was about to learn that the species they had considered the most peaceful was, when necessity demanded it, the most formidable military force in galactic history. And in the depths of space, approaching Imperial reinforcement fleets began receiving tactical reports that described an enemy beyond their comprehension, a species that had somehow weaponized the very cooperation and coordination that had made them seem weak. The silent war had begun, and humanity was no longer silent. The news of the Imperial fleet's defeat spread through the Empire's military hierarchy with the speed reserved for catastrophic failures. Deep within the hegemonic core, hundreds of light years from Earth, Supreme Military Coordinator reviewed the tactical reports with growing disbelief. 47% fleet casualties in 6 hours of engagement, she read aloud to her assembled war council. An enemy that demonstrated tactical capabilities exceeding our most advanced projections. Complete failure of standard conquest protocols. She looked up at the gathered commanders, beings who had participated in the conquest of 12 galaxies. Explanations. Fleet commander, or a veteran of 8 major galactic conquests, spoke first. Supreme coordinator, War Master Thanes, reports suggest the humans concealed their true military capabilities behind a facade of pacifism. However, the scale of technological superiority described in these reports indicates development periods exceeding anything in our experience. Supreme Coordinator activated the holographic tactical display, showing the Empire's current military disposition across 3 galaxies. The second and third fleets are currently engaged in pacification operations in the Andromeda sectors. Recall will require 14 standard time units. Are we prepared to redeploy 2/3 of our military assets against a single species? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Empire represented. In 5,000 years of expansion, they had never required more than a single fleet to conquer any target, regardless of size or apparent defensive capability. War Master N, commander of the Second Fleet, provided his analysis. Supreme Coordinator, if these reports are accurate, we're not facing a conventional military opponent. The humans appear to have developed some form of collective coordination that enables perfect tactical integration across their entire species. This represents a completely new form of warfare. Collective coordination. Sinterest peaked. Elaborate. The tactical data suggests every human civilian became part of their military network simultaneously. 8 billion beings operating with perfect communication and coordination, each one capable of controlling multiple weapons systems. It's unprecedented. Fleet Commander, the Empire's leading specialist in siege warfare, offered additional perspective. Supreme Coordinator, conventional conquest assumes the enemy operates according to traditional command structures. If the humans have somehow eliminated the distinction between civilian and military personnel, our standard tactics become ineffective. Studied the reports more carefully, focusing on the specific engagements that had cost them the most vessels. Their weapons technology appears approximately equivalent to our own, yet they achieved tactical superiority through coordination alone. Yes, Supreme Coordinator. Our ships individually outclass theirs, but they coordinate thousands of smaller platforms with perfect timing and targeting. The effect multiplies their capabilities exponentially. The implications were staggering. The Empire's military doctrine was built on the principle of overwhelming force applied through superior technology. But if an enemy could achieve superior coordination, their technological advantage became irrelevant. Recommendations asked. War Master and spoke with the authority of 5 centuries of military experience. Full mobilization. Supreme Coordinator. Deploy all 3 fleets simultaneously, along with the core defense units. If this species has indeed developed capabilities that can resist our standard forces, we need to overwhelm them before they can share their coordination technology with other galactic species. The decision to commit the Empire's entire military force against a single target was unprecedented. But so was the threat they faced. If humanity could resist imperial conquest, their example might inspire other species to develop similar capabilities. Authorization granted, decided. Implement Protocol Omega 7. Full military mobilization with authority to employ any necessary force to ensure complete conquest of the target galaxy. Protocol Omega 7 was the Empire's ultimate expression of military power, designed for threats to their fundamental existence. It had been used only twice in Imperial history, both times to eliminate species that had developed technologies capable of threatening Imperial rule. As the mobilization orders spread throughout the Empire's territory, nearly 8,000 warships began converging on the galaxy that contained Earth. The largest military force in the Empire's history was being assembled to eliminate a species that most Imperial citizens had never heard of. But while the Empire prepared for unprecedented warfare, humanity was making preparations of their own. The Guardian Protocol had expanded beyond Earth's immediate defense to encompass strategic planning for a conflict that now appeared inevitable. President Santos, speaking with the collective voice of 8 billion humans, addressed the emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council. Honored colleagues, intelligence gathered during our recent engagement indicates that the force that attacked us represents only a small portion of a much larger military empire. We are facing an existential threat to our entire galactic civilization. The assembled delegates, representing over 300 species, struggled to process the implications of humanity's revelation. Not only had humans concealed their military capabilities, but they were now claiming that the devastating attack on Earth was merely the beginning of a larger conflict. Ambassador of the Council spoke for many species when he asked, "President Santos, what do you propose? Our military capabilities are minimal compared to what you've demonstrated, and apparently insignificant compared to what approaches us." President Santos activated a holographic display showing humanity's strategic assessment of the situation. We propose the immediate formation of an integrated defense network encompassing all Federation territories. Humanity will provide technological enhancement and tactical coordination, while our allies contribute their unique capabilities and resources. Admiral Nexus of the Crystalline Hegemony raised an objection that many delegates shared. President Santos, your species has hidden the true extent of your capabilities for over 2 centuries. How can we trust that this partnership would be based on genuine cooperation rather than human dominance? The question went to the heart of humanity's fundamental dilemma. They had spent centuries earning their reputation as the galaxy's peacemakers, only to reveal that they possessed military capabilities that dwarfed any other species. Rebuilding trust would require more than words. Admiral Nexus, President Santos replied, "We propose complete integration of human and allied forces under shared command authority. Any species that joins our defense network will have access to our full technological capabilities and tactical coordination through the Guardian Protocol." The offer was as generous as it was shocking. Humanity was proposing to share the military technology they had concealed for centuries, including access to the collective coordination that had made their defense of Earth so effective. Doctor, speaking as humanity's chief diplomatic advisor, provided additional context. Honored colleagues, the Guardian Protocol can be expanded to include non-human participants. Any being who chooses to join our network will gain access to the same tactical coordination and strategic awareness that enabled our defense against the Imperial attack. The implications were staggering. Humanity was offering to share the technology that made them the most militarily capable species in the galaxy, creating a collective defense force that could potentially match the approaching Imperial threat. Representative of the Union asked the practical questions that many delegates were considering. What would this integration require from our species? What costs and risks are involved? General, now serving as humanity's military liaison to the Federation, provided the technical details. The Guardian Protocol expansion requires voluntary neural interface implantation, allowing participants to access our coordination network. The process is reversible, and participants retain their individual consciousness while gaining access to collective tactical awareness. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours, with delegates consulting their home governments and populations about the unprecedented decision they faced. Join humanity's collective defense network and gain access to military capabilities beyond their imagination, or maintain their independence and face the approaching Imperial threat with their existing limited defenses. One by one, species began accepting humanity's offer. The crystalline hegemony, with their advanced sensor technology, saw the strategic value of perfect coordination. The Council, recognizing their own military limitations, chose survival over independence. The Union, already partially integrated with various AI systems, found the concept less foreign than other species. Within 48 hours, over 200 species had agreed to join humanity's expanded Guardian Protocol. The largest military alliance in galactic history was forming in response to the greatest external threat they had ever faced. But even as the alliance took shape, Imperial reconnaissance forces were already probing the outer boundaries of Federation space, gathering intelligence about humanity's allies and their defensive capabilities. Captain now serving as a liaison between human forces and the reconnaissance fleet, reviewed the intelligence data with growing concern. Dr. Singh, the energy signatures we're detecting from the approaching Imperial forces exceed our previous projections by orders of magnitude. Dr. Singh studied the sensor readings, comparing them to the specifications of the fleet they had already defeated. Captain, we're looking at approximately 8,000 vessels, including ships that individually the entire fleet we faced during Earth's defense. Activated her connection to the Guardian Protocol, instantly sharing the intelligence with every human and allied participant in the network. Guardian Control, recommend immediate expansion of defensive preparations to encompass all Alliance territory. The response came not from any individual commander, but from the collective intelligence of humanity's expanded military network. Acknowledged, Captain. Implementation of Protocol Expansion 7 is already. All Alliance species are being integrated into comprehensive defense grid across hundreds of worlds throughout Federation space. The transformation was beginning. The same technological systems that had revealed humanity's hidden military infrastructure were now being deployed to allied worlds, turning civilian installations into integrated defensive networks. Mining operations became orbital weapons platforms. Research stations revealed their secondary functions as sensor arrays and communication nodes. Trade routes transformed into strategic supply lines, supporting a military network that spanned thousands of light years. Most importantly, beings from hundreds of different species began experiencing the tactical coordination that had made humanity so effective. Navigators found themselves coordinating fleet movements with crystalline sensor specialists and computational analysts, all operating with perfect communication and shared strategic awareness. The effect was exactly what humanity had hoped for: a military force that combined the best capabilities of every Alliance species with the coordination that made those capabilities truly effective. Supreme War Master Thane, now commanding the advance elements of the Empire's full mobilization, received the reconnaissance reports about Alliance military expansion with a mixture of anger and concern. They're integrating the entire galaxy into their coordination network. His tactical advisor, still processing the implications of what they were observing, provided the analysis. Yes, War Master. Our intelligence indicates that the humans have shared their collective coordination technology with over 200 allied species. We're now facing an integrated defense network spanning thousands of systems. Thane studied the tactical projections, realizing that the situation had evolved far beyond their original conquest parameters. Estimated defensive capabilities. Unknown, War Master. The combination of human coordination with the diverse technological capabilities of their allies creates variables we cannot accurately predict. We're facing an opponent that no longer fits any of our tactical models. For the first time in his military career, Thane found himself confronting an enemy that represented a genuine unknown. The Empire's military doctrine was built on the principle of overwhelming force, applied according to proven tactical formulas. But those formulas assumed enemies that operated according to conventional military principles. Continue reconnaissance operations, Thane decided. We need to understand their capabilities before the main fleet arrives. But even as Imperial forces gathered intelligence about the expanding alliance, humanity was implementing the final phases of their strategic preparation. The Guardian Protocol was evolving beyond a defensive network into something that would reshape the nature of warfare itself. In the depths of space, hidden construction facilities that had operated in secret for decades began producing vessels and weapons systems based on technologies that combined human military engineering with the scientific capabilities of their allies. The ships they created were unlike anything that existed in current galactic databases. Vessels designed specifically to exploit the tactical coordination that made the Alliance effective. More significantly, the Alliance was developing weapons and tactics that took advantage of their unprecedented coordination capabilities. Traditional warfare assumed that different military units would operate with limited communication and coordination. But when every platform in your fleet could share targeting data, tactical analysis, and strategic awareness instantaneously, completely new forms of warfare became possible. The approaching Imperial fleet represented the largest military force in galactic history. But they were about to encounter an opponent that had weaponized cooperation itself, turning the very unity that had made them seem weak into the foundation of military power. Beyond anything the Empire had ever faced, the Silent War was about to enter its decisive phase, and humanity was no longer fighting alone. The final battle for galactic freedom began not with the clash of massive fleets, but with a single transmission that reached every inhabited world simultaneously. President Santos, speaking with the collective authority of the Alliance, addressed both her allies and their approaching enemies. To the forces of the hegemonic empire, her voice carried across space through communication networks that spanned the galaxy. You have mistaken our restraint for weakness, our cooperation for vulnerability. You seek to impose your dominion over civilizations that have chosen cooperation over conquest, peace over predation. That choice ends today. Supreme War Master Thane received the transmission aboard his flagship as the combined Imperial fleet reached the outer boundaries of Alliance space. 8,000 vessels, representing the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled, formed attack formations that stretched across multiple star systems. War Master, his communications officer, reported, The humans and their allies have formed a defensive line spanning the entire sector. Our sensors detect over 6,000 vessels, though many appear to be converted civilian craft. Thane studied the tactical display, noting the unusual formation of the Alliance fleet. Instead of concentrated defensive positions protecting key systems, the Alliance forces were distributed across the entire region in a network that seemed to have no obvious strategic focus. Their deployment pattern makes no sense, he observed to his tactical staff. They're spread too thin to resist concentrated assault, yet too widely distributed for us to engage their entire force simultaneously. What Thane couldn't understand was that the Alliance wasn't operating according to conventional military doctrine. The Guardian Protocol had evolved beyond simple coordination into something that transformed the fundamental nature of space warfare. Every ship in the Alliance fleet was connected to every other ship through instantaneous communication networks, making their entire force operate as a single, integrated weapon system. Captain, now commanding a task force of integrated human and alien vessels, felt the presence of thousands of other commanders in her consciousness as the Imperial fleet approached. Through the Guardian Protocol, she shared tactical awareness with every other captain in the Alliance fleet, creating a level of coordination that made traditional fleet combat obsolete. All Alliance forces, she transmitted across the network, implement Pattern 7 engagement protocols. Remember, we're not fighting thousands of individual battles. We're fighting one battle across thousands of positions. The first contact between Imperial and Alliance forces came when advance Imperial scouts encountered what appeared to be a small patrol of converted merchant vessels. The Imperial commanders expected a quick victory against obviously inferior opponents. Instead, they found themselves facing ships that operated with perfect coordination, sharing targeting data and tactical analysis instantaneously across their entire network. When Imperial vessels engaged one Alliance ship, every other Alliance vessel in the region immediately adjusted their positions and tactics to support their ally. War Master, reported the commander of the Imperial Advance Force, we're encountering unprecedented defensive coordination. The enemy appears to be operating as a single integrated unit, despite being spread across multiple systems. Thane watched the tactical data with growing unease. His advance forces were suffering losses against what should have been easy targets, while the Alliance forces seemed to anticipate Imperial tactics with impossible accuracy. Implement full assault protocol, he decided. Deploy the entire fleet in concentrated attack formations. We'll overwhelm their coordination with pure force superiority. The Imperial fleet began its main assault with the kind of overwhelming firepower that had conquered 12 galaxies. Massive battleships launched planetary bombardment weapons while attack wings of smaller vessels moved to eliminate Alliance defensive positions. But something unprecedented happened as the assault developed. Instead of the expected collapse of defensive lines, the Alliance forces began demonstrating tactical capabilities that every principle of conventional warfare. Alliance ships appeared to know where Imperial attacks were coming before those attacks were launched. When Imperial vessels moved to flank Alliance positions, they found Alliance forces already positioned to counter their maneuvers. Most disturbing, Alliance weapons seemed to target Imperial vulnerabilities with precision that suggested complete knowledge of Imperial ship designs. How are they predicting our tactical movements? Thane demanded as he watched another squadron of Imperial vessels fall to precisely coordinated Alliance fire. His tactical advisor provided an analysis that challenged everything they understood about warfare. War Master, their response patterns suggest they're processing tactical information at speeds that exceed our most advanced computing systems. Either they've developed artificial intelligence beyond our understanding, or they're operating with some form of collective consciousness. The truth was more remarkable than either explanation the advisor had suggested. The Guardian Protocol hadn't simply connected Alliance forces through communication networks. It had created a collective military intelligence that drew upon the tactical experience and analytical capabilities of millions of different minds. Every human connected to the network contributed their understanding of strategy and tactics. Every alien ally added their own species' approach to warfare and problem solving. The result was a collective military consciousness that could process tactical information and generate strategic responses faster than any individual intelligence, artificial or otherwise. Dr. Singh, monitoring the battle from her position aboard the research vessel Harmony, marveled at what she was witnessing. Captain, the coordination patterns we're achieving exceed our theoretical projections by several orders of magnitude. We're not just sharing information, we're thinking together. Nodded, experiencing the same phenomenon. Through the Guardian Protocol, she could sense the tactical awareness of thousands of other commanders, each contributing their own perspective to a shared understanding of the battle developing around them. Dr. Singh, I think we're witnessing the evolution of warfare itself. When every participant can share perfect information instantaneously, traditional military concepts become irrelevant. The effect on the Imperial fleet was catastrophic. Their standard tactics, which had proven effective across 12 galaxies, were being countered by an opponent that seemed to understand their strategic thinking better than they did themselves. Every time they attempted a new approach, Alliance forces were already positioned to respond. Supreme War Master Thane found himself facing a situation that challenged his fundamental understanding of military superiority. His fleet, the Alliance forces, his individual ships were more powerful than their opponents, and his weapons technology was more advanced. Yet he was losing. War Master, his fleet coordinator, reported with barely controlled panic. We've lost over 30% of our forces. The enemy coordination is beyond anything in our tactical databases. They're not fighting like separate units. They're fighting like a single organism with thousands of appendages. Thane activated the Empire's emergency protocols. All vessels implement protocol devastation. Target civilian population centers directly. Force them to choose between maintaining their coordination and protecting their noncombatants. The order to target civilians was tactically sound, according to Imperial doctrine. But it was also the decision that transformed the silent war into something far more significant than a military conflict. By choosing to threaten Alliance civilian populations, the Empire had declared its intent to eliminate entire civilizations rather than simply conquering them. President Santos, connected to the Guardian Protocol, along with 8 billion other humans and millions of allied beings, felt the collective response to the Imperial threat against civilians. All Alliance forces, she transmitted across the network. The Empire has chosen to target our families, our children, our future. This is no longer a territorial conflict. This is a war for the right of peaceful civilizations to exist. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the moment when cooperation became a weapon more devastating than any technology. Across hundreds of worlds, billions of beings connected through the Guardian Protocol experienced a shared determination to protect their civilization from an enemy that recognized no limits to acceptable warfare. The Alliance fleet, already coordinating with unprecedented effectiveness, began operating at levels that approached the theoretical limits of tactical coordination. Every decision made by any commander was instantly shared and evaluated by millions of other minds. Every tactical insight was immediately incorporated into fleet-wide strategy. Imperial vessels, which had seemed invulnerable just hours earlier, began falling to weapons fire that anticipated their defensive maneuvers with impossible accuracy. Alliance forces coordinated attacks that struck Imperial weak points with the precision of surgical strikes, while Imperial return fire encountered defensive positions that seemed to know exactly where to expect incoming weapons. War Master, his tactical advisor, reported, "Their coordination is exceeding our ability to counter. Every tactical adjustment we make is immediately countered by responses that suggest complete understanding of our capabilities and limitations." Thane studied the tactical display, watching his massive fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy that operated according to principles he couldn't comprehend. Implement final option protocols. Deploy the planet killers. The planet killers were the Empire's ultimate weapons. Massive vessels designed to eliminate entire worlds when conventional conquest proved impossible. They had been used only 12 times in Imperial history, each time to send a message to other species about the consequences of resisting Imperial rule. But as the planet killers began targeting Alliance worlds, they encountered something the Empire had never faced before. The Guardian Protocol had anticipated exactly this escalation, and Alliance forces were prepared with responses that went beyond conventional military tactics. Instead of attempting to defend every world separately, Alliance forces implemented a strategy that treated their entire civilization as a single entity. Populations began evacuating from targeted worlds, but instead of fleeing randomly, they relocated according to patterns that optimized their collective survival and maintained the integrity of the Guardian network. More importantly, Alliance industrial and research facilities began producing weapons specifically designed to counter planet killer technology. Working with the collective intelligence of millions of connected minds, Alliance scientists developed countermeasures that exploited weaknesses in Imperial superweapons that even their designers had never recognized. Captain, leading a strike force of converted civilian vessels against one of the approaching planet killers, felt the tactical awareness of the entire Alliance fleet guiding her approach. All units implement Pattern Omega. We're not just stopping these weapons, we're proving that cooperation can overcome any force. The battle between Alliance strike forces and Imperial planet killers became a demonstration of two completely different approaches to warfare. The Empire relied on overwhelming individual superiority, massive weapons deployed by ships that could destroy anything they encountered. The Alliance relied on collective coordination, thousands of smaller vessels working together with perfect tactical integration. The outcome was never really in doubt. Imperial planet killers, designed to operate against conventional opposition, found themselves facing attacks that came from directions they couldn't predict, targeting weaknesses they didn't know they possessed, coordinated by opponents who shared perfect tactical awareness. One by one, the Empire's ultimate weapons fell to Alliance forces that operated as a single, integrated intelligence. More importantly, their defeat demonstrated that the Empire's military doctrine, which had conquered 12 galaxies, was fundamentally vulnerable to opponents who could coordinate their efforts perfectly. Supreme War Master Thane, watching his planet killers destroyed by converted civilian vessels, finally understood the true nature of what he faced. They've weaponized cooperation itself, he realized. They're not fighting as separate units that coordinate their fighting as a single entity that happens to have multiple physical forms. The implications were staggering. The Empire's entire military philosophy was built on the principle that superior individual capability would always overcome inferior collective action. But humanity and their allies had developed collective action to a degree that made individual superiority irrelevant. War Master, his communications officer, reported. We're receiving surrender demands from the Alliance fleet. Thane activated the communication link, curious to hear the terms that beings who had seemed so peaceful would offer to an enemy that had sought to destroy their civilization. President Santos's voice carried the authority of every being connected to the Guardian Protocol. Supreme War Master Thane, your fleet is defeated, your ultimate weapons are destroyed, and your empire's advance into our galaxy has ended. We offer you and your surviving forces safe passage home, along with our commitment that we will not pursue conquest into your territory. Your terms, Thane asked, expecting the kind of unconditional surrender demands that victorious empires typically imposed. No terms, President Santos replied. Return to your empire with this message. Civilizations that choose cooperation over conquest, peace over predation, have developed capabilities that make them unconquerable by force alone. We will defend ourselves and our allies against any aggression, but we have no interest in becoming conquerors ourselves. Thane found himself facing an offer that challenged his understanding of victorious empires. Throughout his career, he had never encountered a winning force that offered terms that generous to a defeated enemy. Why? He asked. Your forces could pursue our retreat and eliminate the remainder of our fleet. Because, President Santos answered, proving that cooperation is superior to conquest requires demonstrating that cooperative civilizations choose restraint even when they possess overwhelming power. Take this lesson back to your empire. Peaceful species are not weak species, and any force that threatens cooperative civilizations will discover why we chose peace in the first place. The withdrawal of Imperial forces from Alliance space marked the end of the Silent War, but the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. Humanity had revealed not just their hidden military capabilities, but a completely new approach to warfare that made traditional conquest obsolete. More importantly, they had demonstrated that civilizations built on cooperation and mutual support could develop military capabilities that exceeded anything achievable through individual superiority and competition. The Guardian Protocol, originally designed as humanity's ultimate defensive measure, had evolved into something far more significant, proof that collective consciousness and shared purpose could create capabilities that transcended the limitations of individual action. As news of the Imperial defeat spread throughout the galaxy, species that had never considered military cooperation began requesting access to humanity's coordination technology. The Alliance expanded from a defensive necessity into a voluntary association of civilizations that chose collective capability over individual competition. And in the depths of space, where the next Imperial fleet was already being assembled for a second attempt at conquest, military planners struggled to develop tactics that could counter an opponent that had weaponized cooperation itself. The silent war had ended, but its consequences would reshape the galaxy for centuries to come. Humanity was no longer the quiet species that avoided conflict. They had become the proof that peace, properly defended, was the most powerful force in the universe.